Hello everybody and welcome to episode 2 of Army Painting Series 12. We're still working on Baratheon Wardens, and now that the bases are pretty much good to go, we need to get to a color test figure. And I've got also the image on the screen, but fortunately something for me to look at here so I don't have to try and stare at the screen. We've got non-metallic metal that's going on here, but you can see there's a lot of purples and other stuff in there. In some ways, it's a continuation of the Mountains Men. That same kind of non-metallic metal that's not the sky earth that we saw with our Lannister, with the crossbows, the halberds, Knights of Casterly Rock. A little bit of differential there. Now, these guys don't really have a whole lot of area for the freehand stuff because they are not wearing the cloaks there. So we're just going to use this image here. You can even see I'm going to say there's a difference in the steel color. This is a little bit of a darker, I don't want to say blackened steel, but your faceplate here, your visor, let's see if we can't get a different lighter color steel on there. It's fairly large, so I think we can do that. We're obviously going to be playing off of our bases right here, which means we need to be reflecting this sort of stuff here. Which means we may change some of the figures when they go on the base to just so we know exactly where the reflection should be. Now this has been, I hit it with my spray varnish there, the Tester's dull coat, and you can see all the differences where some things were shiny, whatever. That's all flattened out, and I think you can see some of the blue that's in that black. It just makes that yellow really pop out nicely. So what we will do is we're going to start our color test figure here, and then we'll put him on his appropriate base, and then we'll see how that goes. But first, we're going to talk about the paints we'll use. And lately, we have been using the ProAcryls here, especially some of the newer stuff, the transparents, and then some of the new general paints. Like we got the yellow ochre here, the black brown, the dark blue. Well, guess what? You pretty much saw all of these colors as we were painting the base, right? The transparent yellow, the transparent orange. So we'll use these and obviously a few others. We may put some of the transparents up in here. These, again, are those little watercolor things. And you get a whole big package of these on Amazon for not a whole bunch. They're really fantastic for if it's the intensity inks, the contrast paints, whatever it is. The usual with the number 8 round craft brushes. Now, we'll see just how this works. Now, I'm thinking, see here we've got the shielded as shiny, but here I think we're going to have to go with the shiny edge and then yellow in the interior. Because again, this is for the Wardens. Let me see if I can find the unit card real quick. And we'll just do this. This is one of the other units that I may or may not actually try here in a series as well. We got the Stag Knights. And Sentinel. No, these are the two hammer guys. Actually, I'm really looking forward to doing this. This leaf armor right here. That's going to be a whole bunch of fun. So we are going to get down to it. We've got our card over here. We're going to get some paints out on our palette. And we're going to do some initial glazes on this. Now, he may rock back and forth a little bit on this. This is pretty much the best solution that I could come up with for doing this. I also have to figure out, I think, is all of this stuff metal, or I have to sort of, there's some clothes here. I have to decide, is that going to be yellow or what's that going to be? But we'll get into that once we get the paint out onto the palette. So we'll be right back. Let's get some colors out here. And we have some fairly basic stuff. We've got that transparent orange, transparent yellow over here. I did throw this out. It's another one of those off-whites. This is olive flesh. In many ways, it's pretty close to the maiden flesh, right? The off-white that we use for the Reaper line. And I'm always trying to find equivalents. Obviously, clear yellow. Reaper has a clear orange now. this dark blue-black, I think it is, or dark blue. It's a little bit like a blue liner over here. The brown black or black brown, basically a brown liner over here, effectively a gray liner over here. That is the dark neutral gray. So like I said, these are just so, there's so many equivalents here. I'm trying as many ways as possible to give you guys different options. So what we're doing is we're taking some of the blue, that gray, touch of the faded ultramarine here. And let's just throw some little glazes here and there, maybe change things up. That was more of the dark neutral gray, I believe is what it's called, and we're going to work our way down here, the chest plate and such. I could do the sponge thing, right, that we used to do in the past. I think here, maybe I won't do that, maybe I will. These paints, as far as the ProAcryls, sometimes they can take a while to dry. I think you saw what I did there. There's a little more of the faded ultramarine that got into that. And as I said, none of this is any kind of final color. We're just trying to establish how much blue do we want in there. Do we want the purple that we see? I just see so much purple in that. Is that something we want to add in later with secondary glazes and such things? Now what I am going to do is just, because context is everything, guess what? I'm just going to hit that so that it's darker. Because if I got that thing right next to all my armor colors, I think you can imagine they're all going to look way too dark. Even the highlights. So I had to remove that potential distraction there. Get to the faded ultramarine. Let that work its way in. It's kind of a watercolory type thing going on. We'll even throw in a bit more of that faded ultramarine. Now again, I realize he's going to rock back and forth a little bit. It's whatever. It is what it is. Yeah, let's get this on his helmet now. Make sure just to get that down into the crevices. There's none of this, and it has to be a final earth-shattering moment here. It's just, you put it in there. Here we got some of the brown. Just gonna throw that back there, just to have it. It's a whole lot easier to throw that in there now than it is trying to work our way around it. Yeah, throw some of this ochre in here. I mean, you can see we're not being super fancy about it. Doesn't really matter. Here, the handle, no big deal. I'm just gonna throw that ochre brown combo on there. Good enough. When we're doing the entire unit, well, obviously we're going to do this across, well, 11 guys, obviously. And there's the usual, there's 3 different poses. There also is the banner, so I'm definitely wanted to save that for when we're doing the rest of the unit there. Now let's give ourselves a little action on this hammer. And I think, as you can tell, the entire unit, all about hammers. And some of them got 2, some have 1. All about the hammers. Now, I'm just going to keep going with some of that faded ultramarine, and I believe this is something you are going to see a lot of over the next few episodes. I think you're going to see an awful lot of that faded ultramarine. Now, I also don't want to start to lose those darks. Now here, okay, in an area like that, say in a previous series, we would have taken the sponge and we would have probably wiped away a lot of that paint, so there already would have been some lighter color in that area. here it's, well, we're painting that in. I think you can already see how these metals begin to develop. I'm trying to think as early as I can about reflections and that sort of thing. And now this is where it gets interesting. Okay, I think you've heard me talking a lot lately with the armor stuff about how even the armor reflects on itself. Now this is a case where it sort of has to, because we've got the helmet here which needs to reflect that. Okay, this has to be reflected in here. Even at the earliest stage, gotta start thinking about that. And this is stuff that just never occurred to me. I've painted armor for years, but never, it didn't register like that, well, okay, his arm is right next to this as far as armor goes, so that needs to be reflected. The helmet needs to be reflected somehow. It wasn't until I started to see pictures of actual people in armor in somewhat real world situations, or at least live situations, as opposed to some posed thing or something like, again, a piece of armor in a museum somewhere that's just up against the wall with some spotlights on it. Whole different deal. Very different indeed. And you can see how this doesn't take long to start getting a feel for, all right, what do we want here on the armor on his shoes here. What's interesting is, in some ways, the reflected light coming from the ground, it gets muted a little bit because, well, it's black or bluish black marble. So that's something I have to think about and consider pretty carefully there. And now these guys really are, see, when I look at the reference picture, this is metal, but that's almost more like padded clothing there. Even then, I'm seeing some difference in texture. It's almost like this. So let's see if we can do some different armor colors there. Actually, I've got one other guy here. Let me grab him. See, yeah, so I'll do that as armor because that's looking much more like the reference photo there. So I've got some here that are still the... now that's different. So that one is just cloth right there. So there are some differences between these. Okay. Yeah, that would be weird for armor, for sure. I'm really only seeing that. Yeah, armor should kind of be more interlaced than this. It shouldn't just be a checkerboard like that. Although it is kind of unusual. Oh, what the heck. Maybe we'll paint that yellow just to get a little color in there. So we're making a change. We always talk about being open to that. Kind of shifting from the original plan. And this is interesting here because these are going to be a lot of these linear highlights. And for sure that's got to be on the brighter side up there. The hammer, I'm thinking, oh boy, that's so vertical. That's going to make that an bit of an interesting challenge. Now this would have to be more along the line of reflected light. So what I'm putting on here right now, geez, pretty much a middle tone, I would say. I think I can already bring my brightness up to normal levels. And this is another reminder, as far as it goes with the Creature Caster paints. And it's something it's not my favorite aspect of them, that yes, they dry, and when they cover, they really cover, but it does remove, or take away some of the options that you would have if you were doing this exact same stuff with the Reaper clears and the liners. Just, that's how this paint is. Every single paint line is, well, you kind of hope that it's different, because if they were all exactly the same, why in the world would you ever buy more than one paint line? In some ways, I still don't necessarily see why everybody needs to have one of everything in every paint line. It's just not necessary. Now, I'm going to say that's dry enough for me to start to work in a change. And maybe I've got 2 units of these. Heck, maybe on the other unit I make this that bluish black color. Or even within the units themselves, maybe one has yellow, the other one the blue black. Now there does have to be at least an indication of some yellow here, and this is what I mean about how the creature caster slash monument slash slow fuse paints cover, because dang, look at that. I'm also going to say there's a bit of goldishness over here, if that's a word, because we have basically some antler filigree over here on the knee in each case. Now here, with this shield, the way the angle is pointed, I kind of instinctively wanted to work in as much orange as I could there, but just as I look at it, I said, no, can't really do that because of what it's pointed at. It's pointed at this blue-black. That is my reminder right there. Now I just took nothing fancy. It was some of the olive flesh, mixed it with the black-brown, essentially maiden flesh mixed with brown liner. Contrast-wise, probably wildwood with, oh gosh, what was that? The Screaming Skull white, or whatever the white was in the GW paints. I've long since forgotten that because I really don't care about names. Just not my thing. And you can see this is not relatively watery. It's pretty darn watery, but yet, I mean, it covers like some other paints cover when they are 100% pigment with no water. Again, just something to keep in mind as you're working with this. Now, I'm going to just say that's got to be some form of metal color. And as always, now, I think by default, I'm getting just that hint of purple. That's coming from the faded ultramarine, which is very helpful. Oh, what are we going to do here? Let's dry this out a touch. One of the favorite things for me about the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, there's so many things that I like, but the fact that the chainmail, just the nature of the way it's sculpted and cast, it's pretty darn perfect every time. Which, speaking of time, saves me time because I'm not having to practically draw it in. Because well, more often than not, that's what I've got to do with stuff like chainmail, is just almost draw it in. Now I gotta do some reflections here, and that's where we're actually gonna make this more of a blue. Usually the reflections, and you've seen it in all the other series, any kind of reflection of the ground was generally some sort of a tan, brownish color along those lines. And here, we're changing that up, making it more towards the blue, because what are we pointing at? We're pointing right at all of this blue right here. Now, the unit as a whole, when all of these guys are out on the tray, the amount of people who will probably be aware of that will be maybe like 0. I just don't see a lot of people being aware of that. But you'll know it's there. Alright, I gotta make sure. Here we go. Looking at my... Here, this. I also need to think... Oh, there's a strap right there. Now, and this is still, I guess, on the value scale, maybe a 3-ish, 3 or 4. So there's plenty of room to get lighter with this. Even the olive flesh is not a white. It's just like that maiden flesh, where it's light, definitely light, but most definitely not white. It's not just devoid of any color whatsoever. And I have to see, there's actually some more yellow that I've got to work in here. There's just a hint of some sleeves there. A hint of some sleeves. Oh, yeah. Now, speaking of reflections of helmets on these shoulder pads, you won't really be able to see what I'm doing there, but it's there anyway. And I'm fairly certain, just looking at the references, this is just, it's not like the stag filigree on the knees. That is just a light color there. We're going to do some of the gold stuff there too. We'll do that later on. And here, most definitely we need these vertical elements. I think on the Mountain That Rides, there was a lot of that happened. And that's definitely a video you guys can go back and watch, because that is, I'd say, of all the other videos that are up there, this type of armor painting is probably going to be closest to that. But I'm enjoying the purple nature of this, and it's coming from that faded ultramarine. And then that'll recede, take a back seat a little bit once that gets lighter in those areas. Then you'll have less of the purple, especially where we add that olive flesh. But I almost said olive tapenade. Now that would be an interesting paint color. Okay, I don't want to affect that too much. What do we need here? I'm going to go back to these reflections again, looking for the blue there. We'll mix it. It is really interesting taking essentially a sky blue color, and we're doing that in the ground. The sky is the ground. What's up is down, what's down is up. Something told me that it would be fun to do this, something like that with this unit, as far as the basing and everything else. I didn't realize it would be this entertaining. So we're almost to straight up faded ultramarine. And then what we'll do is we'll start to mix in a touch of the olive flesh. Now these are also metal, so those are going to require some bright highlights, and I think that's segmented in a few pieces there. I'm just going to rotate this around so you can see it now. See all of those linear, there's a lot of these lines all along the the armor there. We're trying to do that even at this very early stage. We're what, 20 minutes in? Basically exactly 20 minutes in. And you can see it's not so much about the more of the flat armor surface or that broad shading. It's a little more like this. So here we're going to do this again. We're going to divide up this area into a few. Now after I get this last little bit of the ultramarine in here, I've got to get into my yellows here, because I'm already starting to lose a little bit of context, because this is looking really light. And it's not. That yellow is going to be much brighter, and it's going to affect how I see these colors that I've put down here as far as the faded ultramarine on the armor. Gonna have to get a little touch of his chainmail. Okay. So we're gonna take a pause on that, and I do want to get a touch of orange in here. And let's see what difference that now makes. I'm just gonna call this some kind of padded leather armor. It makes more sense the way this is shaped. I guess the way the other armor is shaped, while it may be unusual in some ways, it still is. To me, it seems kind of sort of valid in the way armor is constructed. So it would be weird for them to all of a sudden just say, well, here's a tunic with just a bunch of these squares metal squares stuck on it at super regular intervals. That doesn't really offer a whole lot of protection. But some kind of padded armor underneath the regular. I don't know if it's underneath. It's definitely not underneath chainmail. Here we go. So even this starts to make a difference. I will try and work some of that into here. Obviously the stag, we've got to make that darker. I am going to just, if I can, mark some of these little gold things. Just really quick. You can't even see them pretty much for the most part, just because of where they're located. And you can see this is nowhere near the lightest yellow that we're going to do, but it already starts to make a difference. Let's make this a bit lighter. Let's take our first little touch of the olive flesh, and you'll see, bam. I mean, that is a huge difference. And look at the way that stuff covers. It's insane. It's the clear paint, as far as the Reaper stuff goes, that will cover too if you add some form of a lighter color like this, a lighter opaque color. But this seems to really change and really become super opaque when you do that. And I'm just gonna spread out this brush a little bit here. Okay, I'll do some here. Now I'm gonna actually go back to my orange or tone this down. Because now even this, well, I can go a lot lighter than this too. But we'll sort of save that quiver for right now. Or keep that arrow in the quiver. We're fairly well established on what we wanted to do. Now, depending on the time here, I think I've got a few. No, I think I will just divide that up. I think I'm gonna go with the faded ultramarine, lightening that up, adding basically more highlights to the armor. We'll do that in a different segment. No sense in rushing through that in 5 minutes here. So we'll carry that on into the next segment then. And this, all of these items here, I've got to be aware that those are metal and this stuff right here is not. So I don't want to highlight this in the same sharp way as, say, the metals, or even give it the kind of reflections that the metals do. It's one of those things where I'm going to have to just make that mental note and try and not forget. That's all I could really do at this point. Okay, let's get a little more of this in here. And then we will move on to our next stage, where we start to get in some of our lighter colors, not necessarily the full all-out highlights on the metals, but definitely start to work out, okay, this is maybe where we want some high levels of contrast. The other thing we'll also do is work on this shield a bit more. So here, this is, yes, it's yellow, yes, it's lighter, but you can see that's grayed down, and the whole reason it's grayed down is because of where it's pointing. Now, the shields that are, there's some that are pointing up towards the sky. Those, I will actually give those some nice bright sort of oranges and stuff. Make those more intense. So that's maybe the extent of all the reflected light that guy's going to get there. And any reflections, okay. So what we'll do is now we're going to take the olive flash and our faded ultramarine. We'll start to find our lights here. We're starting to really match what we've got on our reference pictures. So we'll be right back with that. Let's move in with some lighter colors with our faded ultramarine and olive mixed together. Now, a quick note here. Ironically enough, this is the base that he is going to be standing on, which means we need to get some of that yellow reflected into here too. So that is something maybe I'll put a little bit of that on here now just that we know it. He's pretty much going to be oriented this way. We'll put him on the base. That'll be the last segment. We put him on the base, and then we figure out just from there how much more yellow has to be reflected and such on the armor. So here we go. What this, and I'm just looking at the brightest highlight colors on the armor in the reference photo. You can see there's a touch of yellow to it. So something like an ivory or like this seems to be a good choice as far as this highlight color goes. And there's almost like some squiggliness. See that? That's in your reference photo there over what is basically his right eye. There's almost a little squiggly line highlight in there, which is kind of interesting. And remember, we have a ways to go here. We're not all these linear highlights. We can still go to white from here. We're not losing that option. We want to keep that in our pocket for as long as possible. Now, definitely going to do some linear things here, but have a little bit of a bend in them, because maybe this is handmade armor, so it's not machine made, so there should be maybe some variations in there, I would say. And we're going to do the same thing here. So we're looking for highlights like this that give us that sort of linear effect. I know I keep using that word a lot, but it's basically the most accurate way I can describe it. Now, as far as the hammer goes, we need to now start to assess where's are there going to be, how much in the terms of light on this top surface of the hammer, just how much chrome, polishedness is there to this hammer. They seem to be relatively polished. It's sort of a hybrid between, well, that super shininess of your Lannister halberds and the crossbowmen. Just a bit more. Some of these plates. And on the top of the shield, we got to do that. Remember, we got to hit that stag too and make that somewhat darker. I mean, heck, this here is not even straight up. There, I turn that around, you can see it better. Even this is not straight up olive flesh. Or if it was, again, the Reaper stuff, you're looking at maiden flesh would be the equivalent there. And of course, we can always do glazes over the top of this to knock things down. Maybe that's where we could take some of the transparent blue, some of the transparent black, and water it down and do a glaze that way. Now here, this is where, just while I'm thinking about it here, let's grab some of this. And let's see what we can do here reflection-wise. Just work in a touch of the yellow here. Once again, I don't want to do too much of it right now because, well, we don't know exactly where that's going to end up. But to me, I think just making that little mental notation there, not a bad idea. All right. So I just got to move this around so that, now hopefully you can see that. I need to see it, certainly. I guess there's a bit of a cut there in that armor. Let's see. That almost forgot his fingers here. Now, one thing with these brushes here, after you use them a little bit, this is one of the newer ones, you can sort of sculpt that brush a little bit. I'm just gonna, there's a little bit of a unevenness to the hair. There's always one hair that's like super long for whatever reason, and you just have to use it for a little bit to sort of make that hair reveal itself, and then you can just sort of snip it off, and it really then changes the usefulness of the brush. It just lets me use it for more of this type of stage than maybe otherwise possible. So still working away here. I gotta remember, even in here, to have some, that just can't be that dark and dead. We gotta put something in there. Gotta have something in there. So here we go. Yeah. There's a little something there now. We need some reflectiveness here. And speaking of which, we need to do some on the sleeve. So we're throwing in some yellow there. Almost completely forgot about that. That would not have been a good thing. Which means now, can you see? Now you can. Tougher for me to see, but there, reflection yellow, there, reflecting yellow. Maybe even a touch here. Here's some yellow. There's some yellow. Now, we're going to go with a mix of the, once again, the blue and the, oh gosh, what is that? The dark neutral gray, I think it is. And we'll just hit this stag. Interesting that this stag doesn't have that crown on it like the other versions of the Baratheon symbol. If I wanted to, I could do other little filigree on this shield. And now, but this is where the army painting stuff comes in. Is it worth it to do filigree on every single shield? Or maybe just do it on your, well, the Master Warden and the Banner Bearer, if he's got a shield too. Because I think this is supposed to be more of a line unit as opposed to the elite unit. So like the Stag Knights, well, maybe there. That's where you go a little more nuts with freehand. Because, like we talk about in every single one of these, all of our time is limited in some way or another, for some reason or another. We do not have unlimited time to spend on our armies. We want to certainly get the most out of it, visual-wise and hopefully playing experience-wise. Now, for me, just it's the nature of the beast. I'm going to get to play very, 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 very few times. Even though I do all those conventions, we work those conventions, which means I am trapped behind a dealer's table, teaching classes, doing whatever. So I can't go off and do tournaments and that sort of thing. So that is one of the reasons why I kind of go more all out with the army. Because since I'm just gonna, which maybe I guess runs contrary to a lot of people's ideas that, well, geez, barely gonna get a chance to play this army. Why the heck would I go nuts on it? Now, for me, it has to be more than just playing the game itself, because that's my limitation. For other folks, they can actually play all the games they want. They just don't either get much time to paint or don't really want to spend that much time painting to begin with. I'm going to try and get myself some lighter colors on the stag while still keeping it as dark as possible. There we are. Now I see there is some gold filigree back here that needs to be noted in some way. Like I said, in the next stage when we really start to finalize things, that's where we'll go into that a little bit more. So now let's get a little more faded ultramarine out here. Like so. Doesn't take much. Mix in our olive with that. Definitely other areas that we can lock in some. Certainly along here, I would say, and along here. I have to always be careful with the highlighting of these lower surfaces, not to have those just as light as stuff that's really facing up towards the sky. I gotta decide, what am I gonna do here? That's a flat panel there, so I don't know if I want to have a bunch of lines on it, so we're gonna switch this around. We're going back to our faded ultramarine here, and you can see it is a bit more like a glaze. Yeah, we need to somehow we didn't have that actually quite the way it needed to be, so making a little adjustment here. I'm just looking at the way the picture shows the knee. So we want these, again, not sure if it's the most accurate term in the world, but these spectral highlights, and those would be not in this stage, but either in the next or in some kind of final stage. Because remember, we're trying to hang on to those, whatever sort of is construed as white. It's really not white. We definitely prefer to not have something that's just straight up white. You notice how some of these are also, there's a little bit of a break in those. Now here's a few of these that are more along the lines of just the olive flesh. And I know in doing some other armies that had this type of armor, these are more commission type things, I had used the maiden flesh in that way. So that's how I knew that would pretty much work, and I just wanted to see how similar would this be to the Reaper equivalents. Here we can get a little bit of an extra highlight in a few places there. And we will go back, like I said, into midtones. We want to add some actual purples in here, because I think you've seen, well, on the mountains, man, where there's greens and pinks and there's so much more. Here we're still, in many ways, just working on the framework. We're maybe starting to attach a few more things to it. Maybe it's just the nature of the way this armor is. It is unusual. Here we're going to get maybe a few lights here on some of our gold sections as well. And what do we got here? We got the stag, some eyes here. And I have to start to think about some of these edges. You know, is this another piece of armor underneath there? Is that a tunic thing that's underneath there? Another very precise armor term, tunic thing. Now, the shield here, we do have definitely some chips on the shield, so maybe that is something. We haven't really done that, you know, say chipping on shields. Maybe that's where we take the sponge or whatever and do some of that. Now we've added a lot of those lights, maybe. I'm just going to throw, this is just what, straight up titanium white. We'll throw some of this out here. Like this. And, oh, let's get some of the transparent purple out here, just to play with a little bit. Just a touch there. If I was going to throw out more, I might put it in one of my little vats over there. Now, let's mess around with a few things of purple here. And I'll make it more of a bluish purple here. In some places it'll be on the darker side, some places on the lighter side. And if I ever need to gray it down, I've got something like this brown. See, now that's more of a muted, geez, almost like a little bit of a pinkish type color there. Don't necessarily want that where the sky is. We're going to throw it over here. And some over here. And remember how we talked about where something like pink and green, even though they're sort of right next to each other, they don't register as pink and green. They register sort of as gray. The eye essentially combines the colors together. And that's why we do this. We're looking for some subtleties here. Don't want, yeah, see how that's going to intrude on that? So we have that, just a dark band there, but now we put this almost like a semi-lighter tone in the middle of that band. This is where the extra, for lack of a better term, the extra striations come in without having to just, well, add a whole bunch of lines and make it look like a, I don't know, a drafting table. So here again, we're doing a little bit of the pink over here. It will not even be noticeable. When people are checking this out, they're never going to really see, oh yeah, look, there's pink over there and there's some green over there. It's just not how they're going to see it. I need to do a similar thing like what we did over here on this. We're going to turn that around and do something similar right there. It's like we get a little bit of bonus lines out of that. We certainly definitely need to get a little more reflected action on a few surfaces or two. And if some of this, if I repeat some things that I have said in other videos, well, there's kind of a reason for that. It just reinforces things. There is nothing like repetition. Nothing like repetition to reinforce an idea, a concept. Yeah, I've actually kind of been really waiting on this. I'm gonna add a little more brown to that. I've been very anxious to get this in there because just knowing, like I said, the Mountains Man. Now that was oils, of course. That's a little different in the way that's going to be handled, just because of the drying time and how you can mix colors together on the surface. Now, the reason why you're seeing this episode before the oil painting episode on the Mountains Man is just, well, drying time. And just I'm waiting on those to dry on the color test figure. So I just didn't want you to be kind of waiting on Army Painting Series literally just because paint is drying. So here, let's see if we can't maybe simulate a little bit of wood texture in here. Can you? Oh, good, you can see that. I want it to be on the more subtle side. I really don't want it to stand out a whole bunch. Just going to work in a little bit of the ochre here. Is that the main attraction really is the armor. We don't want to lose focus on that. We do need to drop in a little bit of this, the yellow of the tunic in here though, so that once again I know where to maybe reflect things. Then we will go back, and by purple you can see it's not really purple in that classic sense. We have really grayed it down. See, just a touch of it there. We'll get a little bit of it down here. And why not some in here too? Because we've gone all this way, good grief, 50 some odd minutes, close to an hour into a video, and we haven't said if a color goes somewhere, it must go everywhere. No way we're getting away without doing that. I'm going to see what happens when I make this a touch lighter in a few places. Once again, not wanting to do that whole thing of, too much of something, too much of the good thing can make for a bad thing. What I can do now is take some of the titanium white and start to think about some brighter areas on the armor. Maybe not even everywhere. Maybe not even everywhere, but here. And you can see that that's starting to do the difference that's starting to make it. Just like on the reference pictures now, we're starting to bring out, yeah. And now these little bits of, like the hammer here, this, along the, well, the actual hammer part of this here. See a few of these brighter highlights along the helmet here, on the visor bit. Because all of this, as we work on this color test figure, there is that temptation of, oh, I can do this, I can do this, and I can do this. And then you realize, oh, I can do this. Now I got to do this 12 times, 24 times. Now, in the case of this, 26 times, because you've got the wardens, you've got the banner bearers, so there are extra guys. So as I do all these neat, nifty things, I have to say, what is it? What's the value of doing this particular effect? Now, as we do the rest of the unit, yeah, see what those couple of dots mean? As I work on the rest of the unit, there may be, I find that I overestimated how long something was going to take. So maybe we can build an effect back in that essentially was edited out for time, just like movie editing. Who'd have thought miniatures are like movies? So much can be left on the cutting room floor. Now, the edge of this, I don't know if I really want to get that light, so I'm just gonna not do that. Because remember, I still have to leave us some time here to put this guy on the base. And then see where we might need to reflect some light. Now, speaking of the reflected light, I'm gonna go back to my faded ultramarine here. I've got to do something. There's just like a line here and a line here. We need to make something out of this. It's just a big flat nothing. Maybe, I don't know, it's because basically in the game, these guys basically just stand there and get whacked on. I mean, they just literally just stand there and get beat on, turn after turn. I'm starting to see with the armor, there's lots of nicks and cuts in it and everything. So they try to make things play the way they should according to their fluff, but it seems like they also try to sculpt them accordingly too, which I definitely can appreciate. So I'm going to go back in now with some of the white here. And it's just like you saw on the reference picture on the top of that helmet. But see, there's that little bit of bluishness up there. Maybe we'll fudge a little bit here, and we're going to actually add a little bit of sky blue up here on the top of this helmet. Hey, we just fudge that a tiny bit. And I also need to get a bit more on the reflectivity down here. There's just not enough. It's just kind of registering as being just dark, and that is not what I'm wanting to have. And these may need a bit of leather color here. Certainly don't want them to be bluish. Yeah, blue straps kind of don't make a whole lot of sense right there. So just clean this up. And like I said, in the next segment, then we're going to maybe get into some of our yellows and see what we need to do there. But for now, this part of the hammer, there's actually there wasn't enough definition there. That's the word I'm looking for. It was just a super lack of definition. We're going to go back to our faded ultramarine and actually mix it in with some of our purple there. And I want to see if I can do something along the lines of this. Like so. Yeah, that's what I'm looking to do. A little bit of, again, reflected light. It was just there was just lines with not a lot of then shape. Now this is where we're going to go more towards the, more of a, for lack of a better term, sky blue. It's not really a sky blue, but it's more like that. Is that in place for you there? I think so. And like that, carry that into this edge here. Get some reflection there. I'm also going to need to do some stuff on the hands or the armor on his gloves. Definitely need a few highlights there. Now the glove here is kind of devoid of any real shape. I'm just trying to get a little drop on the end there. The glove is a little bit different in reality than from what I am seeing on that reference picture. And that's, yeah, that can happen. Geez, there's not many miniatures that match the concept art 100% exactly. Okay. I see. Ooh, this definitely needs, yeah, a little bit of a line there too. Though this definitely needs some strengthening of this line here for sure. So I'm just going to, I think what we'll do is call it a day here with this aspect, and we're going to work on what basically just the yellows, our gold colors on the tunic, and on this, it's really just doing some highlights and maybe some other colors, maybe some greens in here or whatever to distinguish it as gold. So we'll be right back with that. Let's do some stuff in our yellows here. I'm actually gonna fool around with some of the transparent yellow, mix it with our, I think that's not the ivory, that is it's our olive flesh color there. So you can see it's a little less on the ochre side and a little more on the lemon yellow side, for lack of a better term. And what we're wanting to do is we're going to clarify these edges a bit here. Sometimes on the miniature the detail just gets a little fuzzy in an area. Sometimes you've got to go in and just enhance it more with the brush than is actually there. Just sort of create shapes that don't maybe exist, just so that it makes a little more sense. See, we're definitely going to get that edge right there. And you can see we still have a long ways to go before white. That is a good thing, especially since we want those brightest white highlights. We certainly want to save those for the armor, because when you see some of the finished photos of this guy, won't take long for you to see where that really makes a nice difference in the armor. Again, hopefully this is on screen for you guys. I really have to sort of lock myself in, which means it's harder to see the screen. So we're getting into closer to that end game, at least for our color test figure here, because the next stage after this, obviously we are going to take him and stick him on that base. Now let's see what we want to do with this shield here. There's got to be a little something more with this. A little something more. Fortunately, since transparent yellow is transparent. I can do some things on here. Can even water it down. This is, as I've mentioned before, one of the biggest differences with the transparents versus your straight up, say, contrast paints. It's more like the clears, again, more like the clears, and that you can thin it with water, no problem, and it's just fine. You don't need any kind of special medium or anything like that, which is handy. Because especially, geez, I think just the other day I don't know if it was the Games Workshop site, maybe Miniature Market, there's still a lot of contrast paints you just can't get. You know, there's sometimes, well, don't hate me for a sports analogy, but sometimes availability trumps ability. And since these pretty much do very much the same thing, and they're half the price and probably at this point no more difficult to get than the contrast paints, maybe you think about these guys. Now here I'm not really obsessing about total smoothness here, because obviously their shields have some nicks and scrapes on them. Heck, we could even do some blood effects on some of these, maybe. Yeah, maybe we'll mess around with that. Now, I do have some of the transparent black, speaking of which, and on my stag here, there's just a few little places that I want to see how that sinks down into our crevices here, because it acts a little bit more the way the brown liner paint would. So let's do a, yeah, see, I can kind of draw in the few cut marks in here. That's not something that really works well with those contrast paints. Just something I found. Again, this is a bit more like, I would say, watered down liner paint. Because I tried it with the contrast paint. It was much more difficult to do any kind of actual lines. Now we're gonna, this is the black brown, or brown black. We are again just looking to fortify some of these shapes that just get a little wonky sometimes. Maybe a little more shading of some of those. And, oh, let's see if we can manage. Is that point? Oh, good. That's oriented pretty good for you. See, something like that. These are cracks that I'm just painting in. These are ones that are sculpted in. This one was added in. And as always, I gotta be careful on these things that are in shadow areas. But see that? Add just a little something extra there. You got these two up here. Well, why not complement those with a few more? Always keeping in mind that same notion of too much of a good thing, well, it's just too much. That's how it is. Now here I'm almost creating my own faded ultramarine. Heresy. I'm just trying to get a little reflected light down in here. Oh, you know what? I just realized I need to maybe go a bit more towards the yellow with this because of what may be, again, the marble underneath. Yeah, and see how that creates a much more of a distinct, nice distinct edge there. So what was that? Just a few seconds, a few brush strokes, nothing crazy, nothing too difficult. But boy, did it add a lot now. Reflection-wise, I need more here. There's not enough. See right here where I'm pointing with the brush? Not enough here. We need something. I even needed a little bit of a light over there. Good, I still have some of my faded ultramarine left, and I'm just looking to make that a little bit somewhat more of a gentle transition there. Okay. Oh yeah, up here certainly have some edges that need some lights here. Boy, that's tough to get the brush in there. Tough to get the brush in there, but if we can do it, certainly worth it. Now your hammer over here. Actually, I just went the wrong way with that. We were going to get our... That's better. There we go. So now we have a little bit of a transition there. Oh, I see we need to do a little more work over here too. That's just, wow, that's just flat. There's nothing going on there. That is dead space. We don't want that. Can't have dead space with metals. That's how, I mean, if you're looking for the, and I hate to use the word, if you're looking for the #1 way that things like a non-metallic effect can fail or just not be convincing, that's a real easy way to do it, is to just have some area that says real fuzzy, that there's not any kind of definition in there. I mean, cloth can have lack of definition, maybe, but certainly not metals. Just something food for thought, I guess. And now we're going in with that, again, with the purple. And the purple is a really nice complement to all of that. So much of the yellow. In fact, we will throw a little bit of highlight on our sculpted stag here. A tiny bit. Oh, I see another cut mark. A couple of more actually here. So this one's sculpted in. So I think I've got it where you can see it. Boom, right there. And now we've got to give it some form of a touch of a highlight there just to bring it out. Boom, good enough. Now, I am going to take, let's see if this works. I have no idea, but you know, I always like to have green in my gold, so I'm just trying to make actually a little bit of a green here. I can even see it on the reference photo. I don't know if you can. Aha. Well, we got all this blue here, so you got these gold accents that are sitting on all this bluish armor, and yet somehow none of that blue manages in the slightest to reflect on all of this metal gold. Well, think of this green that I'm adding as that reflection. And it's, like I said, super subtle to the degree no one's even going to know it's there. But I'll tell you what, once it contrasts against like some kind of orange glaze or whatever that I might put in there, now bang, that might actually stand out too. Now I'm going to see if I've got myself, well, I don't need an ivory. I'll just use this and make some ivory. Add a little bit of yellow to this white. A little bit of the transparent yellow. We're once again looking for some form of highlights here on these golds. There we are. Yeah, and now with that green underneath there, to make these have more impact as I add those, instead of just adding, well, more lights on a color that's already light. And here's a couple highlights there. Now, maybe just a touch along this. This thing along the back here, I almost forgot about that too. Again, it's this little bit of stag filigree back here. maybe just throw a couple of indications of things. Now this, okay, so instead of just adding more lights here, we got to actually go, kind of backtrack a little bit. We need to actually add in a touch of almost a reflection here. So we're doing this. Hopefully it's a middle tone thing. It'll be tricky, but we basically have to paint in around the air. See that? And there. And now we gotta take this up another notch, because I can only highlight that gold stuff so much. But doing this now is going to make the surface behind it look more like metal. Maybe I'll, what the heck, maybe I'll take it one step further. So then we will take that super lemon yellow mix, and now when we highlight these little bits of stag filigree, I think that now has a little more of an impact. Yeah, let's get the edges of these armor, the armor too, yeah. I see a little fuzziness here too. Oh yeah, right here is a whole batch of it that was kind of forgotten about in the frenzy to do other things. I still may need to do something right in here. And what the heck, I'm going to go back to that pinkish purple stuff again. Oh, I want this to be where you can see it. I just want to get in a shape that's right there. And maybe do a reflection. Basically a dual reflection. Helmet to chest plate to helmet. I know it's tough to keep that in your head. I realize that it's something that will require practice. I mean, even I have to. I've done it so many times, and yet I have to. Now it's definitely more ingrained for me, just by virtue of repetition. For you, it's not going to quite be so simple. You will have to train yourself. If this is a new thing for you, you'll just have to get into that mindset. And be sure to be patient with yourself also. Now let's get ourselves, as before, a few lights in here. Oh yeah, we definitely got to do something down here. Oh yeah, we needed to. It's really hard to get a reflected light on something that is so tiny. And geez, I don't even know if you can see this, but I'm just going to throw it in here anyway. I'm doing a double check on the hammer here. Seeing where, again, there is something maybe that's a little fuzzier than it should be. See, thinking about that dark to light routine right there. Now, I'm trying to, on some of my edges here, once again, do the same. Very light, but more in dot form, not as a line. See, just a little dot there, a little dot right there. That lends actually a little bit more of a sparkle to it. See, even here, if this is a, see how it's a broken line? Yeah, a complete line is just going to look like an outline. But if it's broken, now maybe you're either following some form of either a highlight or an imperfection in the hammer, or where there's a dent in the hammer or whatever. Now let's maybe drop in a touch of shading on the handle. But I'm also wanting a few darker elements on this hammer. Just again, looking for definition, as in here. See what that little bit of dark does right there? Can I find some more of these elsewhere on the helmet? You know, maybe should there be chips in the armor itself? We may do that on some guys. I could swear I've seen that in some areas on this guy even. Maybe here's a few little glazes to tone some things down. Again, that is just the transparent black and the brown black, so it's essentially like a brown liner type of action that we're doing there. So at this point, what we are going to do now is take him off of here, stick him on that base, and we'll see what we have. So we'll be right back with that. So here's the big moment. This is where we're going to put him on the base. So what I'm going to do is get that back onto the tray there, and I'm going to pull him off of here. This is just like double-sided tape here, and hopefully it's, well, he's sticking on there a little bit better than I thought he would. We'll just break that tension there a little bit. There we are. And we're going to do the same thing here, like so. Fortunately, these figures are rough and tumble. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I get this, whatever sticky stuff is off of here. That looks good. Now, he's got to be facing forward. So actually, we didn't do too badly with some of our yellow reflections. So, all right, we're gonna drill it right here. I'm going to start that hole and take away our tray. Now I don't have magnets in these yet, and you'll have to apologize the back of my hand. I'm not showing you the back of my hand. Let's drill this in. There we go. Jeweler's block is just, I like to have it. To me, it's well worth it. Now, there's my hole. And there you got him. Now I have a little bit of glue left. This is something else. Sometimes you have to do this. So I have to actually bend this slightly backwards. Sometimes when you drill the hole, it goes in a little bit this way instead of this way. So let's see if we can get a couple drops of glue here. Not much. Now I'm going to bring out my movement tray again. This is a little bit different than all the other ones you've seen. And I'm really liking that faded ultramarine against all of this, against what's on the bases. Oh yeah, that is not too shabby there. Oh, this is so different than the Lannister colors. I'll grab one of those just to show you the difference. I'm really, that is something very fun. Yeah, can you imagine the whole unit like that? Well, you won't have to wait too long for that, because, well, episode 3, we're gonna dive right into it. But first, we are going to take one of our dead paint containers. We're gonna stick him on here, like you do. I'm gonna bring out our palette again from way over here. See what we need to clean up. Let's get our brush here and see how we did. Now, I didn't do too bad here. There's a lot of yellow in there. However, there's a mist panel right here. Okay, I'm going to zoom in again. Like that. There we go. Which means palette goes where it was. We need a bit of muted yellow poof there. That's we were missing a little bit there. Because of all this yellow right here, that's what we're trying to reflect. You can see that it's not terribly bright or light or anything like that. And then as we turn this around, oh look, that was not a bad idea, but I also need more over here. Just the miniatures on the base now. I see, now that's going to be too much. If it's too much, I'm going to access some of my gray right here and quite literally just gray it down. Bang, like so. Now, what other... Like I said, I could go crazy on this, just cleaning up this, cleaning up that. But there's an entire unit to get through. And we're going to mention this an awful lot on the next few episodes. This notion of, well, you know, at this point, it should be reasonably playable. It should look good on the table. Then you work on it some more, and it's that much better in the next phase. And heck, even just... Well, now this is a little bit different because the guys are separated from their bases. If I wanted to, they probably could all get stuck on their bases, so don't be surprised if on the next episode they're stuck to their regular bases. Now, the reason why I didn't, well, trying to get at some of these undersurfaces and get at the shield was a tad bit easier with that not being attached to the base. So it's all going to depend. I know people like it when things are the same every single time, but that really does restrict, well, learning and improvement when it's just the same thing every time, and you'll get bored. And I can tell you right now, I've just seen so many people lose interest. See, now we're starting to do even more of these little spectral highlights, little maybe bits of damage. You know, right here, okay, on this, on the gloves, we certainly needed something. Let's get some knuckles on this. Let's get an edge on that. We certainly need some edges on that. So I'd have to say this was really, to me, this was really interesting. We're trying new paints, new combinations there. We're trying whole new colors, but yet trying to stay rooted in what we've used all along. Hopefully this is another type of armor core that you can add to your arsenal too. If not, maybe you're not doing these guys, but maybe you want to do shinier space wolves or something, and maybe this goes along with that. Here we're looking at, yeah, definitely up here. See where there's the highest part of the surface. Getting a few little edge highlights there on that helmet. But yeah, I think our purple and everything definitely a nice complement to all the yellows. The black here, the blue black that we put down on the marble. You know, here let's do some cleanup things on this too. Now that we're into this stage, we could paint cracks on this. But let's do that, just for funsies, just for fun. There, I just want you to be able to see it. So there, it's a little bit of a crack. Like so. It just now starts to make that floor look a little bit less painted on and more like it's there. Remember, we also are going to be we're going to take some of the weathering powders and we're going to throw leaves over the top of this so that it balances in that fall type setting. And Shazam. Let's here. I need to do something on the handle of this hammer here. That's it. Yeah, I think that's going to be a little better. We need some lighting under here too, but not that intense. Just a bit of reflected light. So, this is it. That's good. The purple there. And a touch more here. Okay, we won't mess around with this anymore because we're at somewhere in the range of 100 minutes on one guy. Times 13, that's a lot of minutes. That's just one unit in your army. And maybe you're not looking to spend that much time on it. So we're going to call this good enough and complete for right now. So thanks again for all your support on this. There's no way this could be possible. I'd have to just be doing nothing but nonstop commission things, which is great, nothing wrong with that. But there's not a lot of new things that I can do on those. I kind of just have to go with the same old because I'm matching previous stuff. So this really allows for new things. And if you can drop a like on this, that also helps just the YouTube channel in general, which also helps the Patreon page, kind of mutual support there. So I appreciate that. And we'll catch you on episode 3, starting to do the rest of the unit.